80 years ago, on December 21, 1944, the small Belgian town of Bastogne was completely surrounded by superior German forces. American soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, trapped without sufficient supplies, medical aid, or winter clothing, prepared for the harshest test in their history. This day became a turning point in the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German offensive of World War II. Prologue: The Storm in the Ardennes. The winter of 1944 was particularly harsh. Snow blanketed the hills of the Ardennes, a densely forested region along the borders of Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. The Allies believed the war was nearing its end. The German army was retreating, and American and British forces already stood at the borders of the Reich itself. No one expected Adolf Hitler to be preparing one final, desperate blow. On December 16, 1944, after a 2-hour artillery barrage, more than 200,000 German soldiers and nearly 1,000 tanks launched a massive assault on the overstretched American positions in the Ardennes. The attack was completely unexpected. Fog, snow, and low clouds stripped the Allies of their main advantage, air power. German armored columns broke through the front lines and surged west toward Antwerp, a vital Belgian port through which the Allies supplied their armies. Hitler's plan was ambitious: to split the Allied forces in two, surround and destroy 4 Allied armies, and force Britain and the United States to negotiate a separate peace. Then the full might of the Wehrmacht could turn east against the advancing Red Army. But the Germans had one obstacle: Bastogne. A town at the crossroads of 7 roads. Bastogne, an unremarkable Belgian town of about 4,000 civilians, had one feature that made it strategically invaluable. 7 major highways converged here, cutting across the hilly Ardennes terrain. For German armored columns that needed good roads for rapid movement, control of this crossroads was vital. General Dwight Eisenhower, supreme commander of the Allied forces, quickly grasped Bastogne's significance. On December 17, the day after the German offensive began, he ordered reserves into the Ardennes immediately. 2 airborne divisions, the 82nd and 101st, were to occupy key positions and delay the German advance until reinforcements arrived. The 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, was resting after heavy fighting at Camp Mormelon in France. Soldiers enjoyed a rare respite: warm barracks, hot meals, and a chance to recover from exhausting campaigns in Normandy and the Netherlands. Many were already dreaming of Christmas leave. But on the night of December 18, everything changed. Marching through the night. The order was brief: load into trucks and move to Bastogne immediately. Division Commander Major General Maxwell Taylor was in Washington at a meeting. Temporary command fell to Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, a wiry, energetic artillery officer of Irish descent, a West Point graduate of 1918. McAuliffe was 46. He had accompanied the division from the Normandy landings on June 6, commanding divisional artillery. Despite breaking his back in May during a training parachute jump, McAuliffe still jumped with the division in the pre-dawn darkness before D-Day. His soldiers called him Old Crusty, but with respect. McAuliffe was a leader who never sent men where he wouldn't go himself. On the morning of December 18, a convoy of hundreds of open-top trucks departed Mormelon. Soldiers huddled together for warmth, many had not yet received winter gear. The night march stretched over 100 miles through freezing darkness. Trucks moved with headlights off to avoid attracting German aircraft. The first units of the 101st arrived near Bastogne early on December 19, just 4 hours before the lead elements of the German forces. It was a race against time, and the Americans won by the narrowest margin. Besides the Screaming Eagles, Bastogne already held Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, several hundred soldiers with tanks and self-propelled artillery who had been holding back the German assault for days. Detached units of the 28th Infantry Division, retreating from the east, the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, and the 969th Artillery Battalion, an all-African American unit proving its bravery in a segregated army, were also present. Altogether, about 18,000 American soldiers gathered in Bastogne, facing nearly 45,000 Germans already surrounding the town. Encirclement tightens, December 20 to 21. McAuliffe quickly assessed the situation. Bastogne had to be held at all costs. He ordered a circular defense around the town, placing units on all roads leading to the crossroads. Soldiers dug foxholes in frozen ground, laid anti-tank mines, and prepared firing positions. The Germans attacked with fury. The 2nd Panzer Division, Panzerlehr Division, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division under General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz advanced from all sides. In the village of Neuville, north of Bastogne, a particularly fierce battle erupted. American paratroopers and tankers repelled attack after attack, but the Germans pressed with superior numbers. On December 19, the first day of the siege, disaster struck. A German tank raid captured the division's rear service area. Nearly all medical personnel of the 101st, doctors, nurses, medics, were killed or captured along with most of the medical supplies. Wounded soldiers now had nowhere to receive proper care. Those who would normally be evacuated to a hospital had to remain in makeshift aid stations in Bastogne itself. By the end of December 20, the Germans had seized the last road out of Bastogne. The town was completely encircled. December 21, 1944, exactly 80 years ago, became the critical day for Bastogne's defenders. The town was cut off from all sides. Communication with the outside world was maintained only by radio. Supplies dwindled by the hour. Artillery was limited to 10 rounds per gun per day. During normal combat, hundreds would be fired. Food ran out. Many soldiers hadn't had a hot meal for days, subsisting on cold rations. Worst of all, there was no fuel for heating, and temperatures dropped below zero. Life in the cauldron. Private First Class Vincent Speranza, the son of Italian immigrants, recalled the first battle on December 19. His unit took positions in an open field north of Bastogne. At dawn, German infantry emerged from the fog, marching confidently, assuming no Americans were present. The lieutenant ordered us not to fire until they were 400 yards away, Speranza recalled years later. The Germans walked calmly, almost relaxed, across the snow-covered field. When they were close enough, the lieutenant shouted, "Now! Now!" And we opened fire with everything we had. It was a slaughter. The snow turned red. After this, the Germans abandoned frontal assaults and began methodically tightening the siege ring, bombarding Bastogne with artillery and mortars. Every night, Luftwaffe bombers appeared overhead, dropping bombs on the town. Buildings collapsed. Fires broke out. Civilians hid in cellars, praying for salvation. Soldiers lived in foxholes dug into frozen earth. Snow covered positions. Many suffered from frostbite and trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold, wet feet. The defenders lacked proper winter clothing. The division had been preparing for rest, not winter combat. Soldiers wrapped themselves in blankets, stuffed newspapers into uniforms for warmth, wearing whatever they could find. But the worst was uncertainty. No one knew when help would arrive, or if it would at all. December 21 was surprisingly quiet. The Germans regrouped, bringing in fresh units for a decisive assault. The Americans used the lull to strengthen defenses, move supplies from rear depots forward, and evacuate the wounded to safer locations. McAuliffe toured the lines, encouraging soldiers. He was a short, stocky man with a square face and a determined gaze. Unlike many generals, McAuliffe avoided profanity. His favorite expression of disapproval was simply "nuts." Captain Vincent Vicari, his aide, later recalled, "General Mac was the only general I knew who didn't use foul language. Nuts was part of his regular vocabulary." McAuliffe understood that morale was everything. If the soldiers believed they were doomed, the defense would collapse. He constantly emphasized that help was coming. General George Patton and his Third Army were already moving north. They just had to hold on. By the evening of December 21, McAuliffe received encouraging news. Meteorologists predicted clear weather in the coming days. This meant the possibility of aerial resupply and, more importantly, fighter-bomber support. But first, They had to survive the next day. December 22nd, nuts. The morning of December 22nd began with fog shrouding the fields around Bastogne. Around 11:30, American sentries on the southern perimeter spotted an unusual sight, 4 German soldiers approaching, waving 2 white flags. Private First Class Leo Palma, a machine gunner of Company F, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, was the first to see them. 2 officers in long coats and shiny black boots, 2 enlisted men. The junior officer, Lieutenant Helmut Henk of Panzer Division's operations staff, carried a briefcase under his arm. They were blindfolded and led to the battalion command post in the village of Marvy. Major Alvin Jones, the senior officer present, took the document from the briefcase and began reading. It was a surrender ultimatum signed by General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz, commanding the 47th Panzer Corps. To the commander of the U.S. forces in the surrounded town of Bastogne. The fortunes of war are changing. This time the U.S. forces in Bastogne and the surrounding area are firmly encircled by 4 German divisions. There is only one way to save the surrounded U.S. troops from complete destruction, an honorable surrender of the surrounded town. If this offer is rejected, 1 German artillery corps and 6 heavy anti-aircraft battalions are ready to destroy the U.S. forces in and around Bastogne. The order to open fire will be given immediately after the expiration of this 2-hour term. All serious losses among civilians caused by this artillery fire will not correspond to the well-known American humanity. German commanding officer. The document was immediately delivered to the division headquarters in Bastogne, in the Belgian army barracks, where McAuliffe had set up his command post. The general was asleep when the ultimatum arrived. He was awakened, read the letter, crumpled it into a ball, tossed it into the trash, and muttered, "Ah, nuts." He then returned to other matters, coordinating defense, monitoring ammunition, planning counterattacks. Staff officers reminded him to give an official response. McAuliffe thought for a moment. What to write? Colonel Harry Kinnard, Chief of Operations, suggested, "Your first response was hard to improve on, General." Everyone laughed. McAuliffe agreed. A sergeant typed a brief message. To the German commander. Nuts. American commander. Colonel Joseph Harper, commander of the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, had the honor of delivering the reply. He returned to the waiting German envoys, still blindfolded in the forest. When the German officer, speaking English, asked for the reply, Harper handed over the paper and said, "The answer is negative." The German was puzzled. "Negative? That's it?" Harper smirked. "If you don't understand what nuts means, in plain English it means, go to hell." He turned and walked away, tossing over his shoulder, "And tell your commander, if you continue the attack, we will kill every damn German who tries to enter this town." The German envoys returned to their commanders. General Fritz Bayerlein, commander of Panzer Division, suggested opening heavy artillery fire immediately. But von Luttwitz stopped him. The heavy guns had already been redeployed further west, to the tip of the advance. Bastogne was no longer a priority. Armored divisions were to move toward the Meuse, leaving the besieged town to the infantry. This was a strategic error. The Germans underestimated how fiercely the Americans would defend. December 23 to 25, clearing skies and hope. On the morning of December 23, a miracle occurred. The fog lifted, clouds parted, and for the first time in a week, the sun shone over the Ardennes. In England and France, hundreds of C-47 Dakota transport planes roared to life. Loaded with ammunition, medical supplies, and food, they flew to Bastogne. By midday, the skies over Bastogne were filled with parachutes, hundreds of green, red, and white canopies slowly descending to bring salvation. Soldiers poured out of foxholes, forgetting caution, and rushed to collect the containers. Artillery shells, rifle cartridges, rations, medical supplies, everything desperately needed. Morale soared. The Americans were no longer alone. Along with the transport planes came fighter bombers, P-47 Thunderbolts. They struck German positions, bombing tanks, artillery, and troop concentrations. The Luftwaffe attempted to counter, but American air power dominated. German columns that previously moved by day without fear now had to hide in camouflage. The next 2 days, December 24th and 25th, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, brought both joy and tragedy. The Germans threw everything into an assault on Bastogne, realizing time was running out. On December 25th, they launched a massive attack on the western sector with tanks and infantry. The fighting was fierce. German tanks breached the American front line, but the 101st Artillery and tank destroyers destroyed them all. Not a single tank returned. That Christmas Day, McAuliffe and his staff ate a modest holiday meal in the command post basement, canned rations with cold coffee. Soldiers on the lines tried to find some joy in the grim holiday. Someone found a spruce branch and stuck it in the snow near a foxhole. Another shared the last chocolate bar with comrades. But all thoughts were on one question: when would Patton arrive? December 26th, the breakthrough. Patton's Third Army had been moving from the south for a week, the legendary, tough commander who despised defense and believed only in attack. On December 19th, Eisenhower had ordered Patton to shift his army from the east to the north and break through to Bastogne. It was an incredibly difficult task. The Third Army was advancing on another front near Mainz. Now it had to pivot 3 divisions, tens of thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of tanks, 90 degrees and move through snow-covered terrain on slippery roads under constant German attack. Patton promised to do it in 48 hours. Many thought it impossible. But Patton delivered. On December 22nd, the 4th Armored Division began advancing north. Each mile was gained through combat. Germans clung to every village and hill. American tanks pushed forward, taking losses but not stopping. On December 26th, in the afternoon, Colonel Creighton Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, future commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, stood on a hill near the village of Assinois, looking through binoculars. Ahead, a few miles away, lay Bastogne. He saw parachutes of supplies opening over the town. "Forward," ordered Abrams. His tanks surged ahead. German infantry and anti-tank guns opened fire. Several Shermans caught fire, but the column pressed on. Tanks advanced in frontal attacks, crushing anti-tank guns with their tracks and firing at infantry with machine guns. At 16:45 on December 26, 1944, the tank Cobra King of Company C, 37th Tank Battalion, reached American positions on Bastogne's southern edge. The first person the crew met was Lieutenant Dwayne Webster of the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion. "How's it going?" asked the tank commander. "Tough, but we're holding," replied Webster. The siege was lifted. A corridor only a few hundred meters wide connected Bastogne to the rest of the army. Convoys with supplies, medical aid, and fresh troops immediately began moving through. The wounded could finally be evacuated to rear hospitals. McAuliffe personally went out to meet Patton's tanks, despite sniper fire. A few days later, Patton himself arrived in Bastogne and, in a formal ceremony, awarded McAuliffe the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest U.S. military award after the Medal of Honor. Epilogue: Immortal Glory. Although the siege formally ended on December 26, fighting for Bastogne continued for several more weeks. The Germans, obsessed with capturing the town, threw new divisions into attacks. The Americans not only defended but counterattacked, retaking nearby villages lost in the first days of the siege, Foy, Noville, and others. The last artillery shells fell on Bastogne in January 1945. By then, the Battle of the Bulge had been lost by the Germans. Their armored divisions, just a few miles from the Meuse, were destroyed by superior Allied forces and air power. The Bulge was eliminated, and the front restored. The cost of Bastogne's defense was high. The 101st Airborne Division lost 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, and 516 missing from December 19, 1944, to January 6, 1945. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division lost about 500 men. Many wounded later died from infections and frostbite. But Bastogne held. And in doing so, the Americans changed the course of the war. Several regiments of the 101st were nicknamed the Battered Bastards of Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division headquarters received the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest honor for entire units. The division also received the Belgian Croix de Guerre 1940 with palm. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called the Battle of the Bulge undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, which I believe will be regarded as an ever-famous American victory. And at the center of that victory stood Bastogne, a small town at the crossroads of 7 roads that refused to surrender.
Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, please subscribe and like it, and join our community of history lovers. We want to hear your voice. Leave a comment on the video, tell us where you come from, or share any family history related to the war. You are not just a spectator, you are helping us spread the truth about the heroism of the war years. We read every comment, and they really inspire us to work. See you next time.